It's been an exciting day, and we always try to have one of the keynote speakers as someone that the entrepreneurs can relate to. And I think it is really interesting how many successful entrepreneurs are in the Bay Area that have been part of a startup that the AOL purchased, part of a startup that Yahoo purchased. A community that he's running now is one of the biggest communities in all web combined. And I think what we try to do with the keynote speakers is to see that how they went through life and how they went through their journey of entrepreneurship, then became an advisor, investor, and a CEO of a large company. Also, Toni, who is a good friend of mine, I think he has a lot in common with people in the Valley. He's not born here, he emigrated here, he's part of our fabric, part of our community, and really I think we all can learn a lot from Toni. So please welcome Toni Schneider, my friend, if he's ready. And they say you really get to know someone if you travel with them. So I traveled like 14 hours to South America on a plane with him next to each other. On the way back, he made sure he's not sitting next to me.
Not true, not true. Thank you. Thank you, Saeed. Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for having me here. Thank you to all these startup pitches I got to see. 3 minutes is tough. Luckily, I get a little bit more time. What I like to do, and what Saeed asked me to do, is share a little bit of my personal story of how I got to be an entrepreneur, and then talk about WordPress, which is the latest venture that I've been involved in, and then open it up to you guys. Hopefully you'll have some questions and I can go deeper on any particular topic that is interesting to you guys. But so to start out with myself, like Saeed said, I didn't grow up here. I grew up in Switzerland. I grew up in Zurich. And after going to high school there, decided to move to California for college. I moved to Santa Barbara. I went to Santa Barbara City College for 2 years, and then I moved to Stanford, and I studied computer science at Stanford. And then pretty much straight out of Stanford, I joined a startup. I was a software engineer. I think I was the second or third person to join this tiny little company. And we built 3D audio systems for virtual reality and flight simulators. And it was an incredibly cool product to work on. We had a great team. We had a lot of fun. It turns out that virtual reality wasn't really happening, wasn't really a great market to go after. But we did succeed in building a 15-person company. We bootstrapped it. And then we got acquired by a semiconductor company who wanted to take our technology and turn it into chips. And I thought, this was about 3 years into my first job, and I thought, wow, this is great. You have a lot of fun at the startup, and then you get bought, and you get to do it again. So I was totally hooked. And I joined this company, Ariel Semiconductor, had acquired us. I was their VP of technology. I learned about semiconductors and chips and how to turn the algorithms we had developed into silicon, which was really interesting. And then I crossed over to the dark side. I became their VP of marketing. And I stopped at that point coding and started learning about sales and all the other parts of running a business. Ariel ended up getting acquired by Creative Labs. And a team of 6 of us inside Ariel decided to start our own company. And we decided, it was 1999, we decided to start a digital music company. And I was the CEO of it. We raised a lot of venture capital, about $6 million, turned into $8 million later on, very quickly before we even started anything. This was 1999. And we built a great product. It got a lot of users very quickly. It was a social music sort of discovery and sharing service, a little bit ahead of its time. And then a couple years into it, we had spent all our money and we had gotten nowhere with our business model because we were trying to deal with record labels, which in retrospect was not a good idea. And we went out of business. And so this was 2001. And I had spent $8 million of venture capital money without anything to show for it. This had been my first time as a CEO. So I had a moment of weakness. I considered for a brief moment that maybe I should get a real job and go join Oracle or Microsoft or one of these big companies, and then decided, no way, and instead joined another startup. This one was just two guys who had actually been in my class at Stanford. It was a company called Outpost, and I joined and became the CEO, and we were building a webmail product, consumer webmail. And this was, again, 2001, 2002 timeframe. There were no startups at the time. Every investor was running for the hills when you said the words consumer internet. We had a little office in Chinatown in San Francisco, and it felt like we were the only startup in all of San Francisco. This was about the polar opposite of what this is, this community of startups helping each other and figuring things out. And we were doing consumer, and we were doing webmail, which basically everybody looked at us and said, why would you do that? You have Hotmail and Yahoo Mail, it's a solved problem. But we built this really cool product we really believed in, and it got a lot of great reviews, and it started to grow, and we were bootstrapping all of this. And then we did end up ending a couple years later, ended up raising a little bit of venture capital money. And all along we had thought, we'd been talking to Hotmail and Yahoo Mail and all these guys, and we had thought, our product is so much better. These guys, they're just gonna see it and obviously gonna love it and they're gonna want it. And we would talk to them for about a year. I would go and talk to the Yahoo guys, and they'd go, yeah, this is really great, but we're working on spam now, and we're not investing in the front end of mail. And they sort of kept, politely telling us to go away. And then Gmail launched, and it completely changed the whole webmail market. And all of those companies we had been talking to came back to us and said, we're ready now. And 6 weeks later, we have been acquired by Yahoo. And so I joined them. I spent a year and a half there, and actually had a great time, but really the whole time thought about the next thing I wanted to go do. And actually, right after I joined Yahoo, I met Matt Mullenweg, who's the founder of the WordPress open source project, and really liked the product and sort of started to learn more about that community. And then about a year and a half later, they decided that it was time to build a company behind WordPress and asked me to join and be their CEO. And at the same time, a friend of mine was starting a VC firm called True Ventures and asked me to join them as well. So I said yes to both of them. And for the last 6 years, I've been a part-time venture partner at True Ventures and the CEO of Automattic, the company behind WordPress. So that's kind of my story. And now I'd like to jump ahead to WordPress today. And I'll just give you a quick overview of what we've built. And then I'll talk a little bit about some of the themes behind it and how I think, some of the reasons why I think we've been successful. And then I'll take questions. So when I talk about WordPress, I usually start with this map. This is a real-time map of the publishing activity across all WordPress installations. Every few milliseconds, somebody in the world hits their publish button inside WordPress and sends a blog post or a video or some pictures out to the world. This happens about over 2 million times a day right now. This is just the posting activity on WordPress. So this is people creating original content and publishing it. This isn't resharing or liking or all the other things that happen once you publish on WordPress. And this content is very popular. Last month, across all the WordPresses in the world, over 8 billion page views were served up. There's a very large community of sites. And I would assume in an audience like this, there's probably quite a few WordPress users. So can't see all of you, but can you raise your hand if you're a WordPress user? All right, thank you. Now the rest of you, actually I think everybody in this room has probably touched WordPress in the last 24 hours because there are so many sites out there that are powered by WordPress. And I'll just jump through a few examples here. All of us are into tech news, so TechCrunch, GigaOM, All Things D. There were others weren't even on here. Mashable, Bits from the New York Times, Pando Daily, Wired.com. All of these sites are powered by WordPress. If you're into news, Salon.com, 100% powered by WordPress. A big portion of CNN these days powered by WordPress. If you're into cars, if you're into TED, if you're into gossip or entertainment, these are all sites, some of the better known sites that run on WordPress. And then of course there's the millions of personal blogs that people run. Altogether, right now there's 72 million sites that are powered by WordPress. And you take that number in a different context, about 16% of the entire internet is powered by WordPress. So that's a big chunk, and we've spent the last 6 years building towards this number. When we first started out, it was just a few thousand bloggers who were using it. And actually our long-term goal is to power half of the internet. So we are on our way, but we set a very ambitious goal in the beginning, and we're working our way towards it. And what's great about our platform is you always hear about the Googles and the Facebooks and all the big sites on the internet that have these huge audiences. And what we represent is really tons of little sites. And if you take all of the WordPress sites together that we see and you turn them into one platform and look at it as one audience, it's very big. Over 100 million monthly US uniques visit a site in our network, which makes WordPress one of the biggest really properties on the internet. And that's just in the US. Globally, it's over 600 million uniques these days, 630 million uniques. And so it's a very, very large platform that we're running. And this slide is actually a recruiting slide that we use for people who want to join us, because we do all of this with a very, very small team. And so we like to sort of tell people that you don't have to turn into this giant, big, lame company to get to the scale. You can do it with us. And so to tell you a little bit more about who's behind this and how we did this, I'd like to touch on 3 things. And this is what, as an investor as well, what we always look for. There's sort of 3 big components to any venture. They're the people, there's the product, and then there's the market you're going after. So these are the people at Automattic right now. These are the 102 people, almost all of them. Last October, we were in Budapest for a week, meeting up, all of us together. So this is what the company looks like today. This is what it looked like when we started. And I assume this is sort of similar to where a lot of you guys are at. And I really, really like this picture. And we actually have interim pictures because we get together every 6 to 12 months and we take a group shot. But this was the first one. And what I really like about this is, to me, this is sort of the perfect team. And what this looks like is this group around the table here. And the other cool thing about this is 8 of us 6 years ago, and 7 of us are still at the company. This team is 4 developers, a designer, a support person, a systems guy, and a business guy. And to me, this is sort of the prototype of a successful team that can get a lot of stuff done very quickly. And I remember back at Yahoo and all the big companies I've dealt with, they always say, oh, we want to be more like a startup. We want to be agile. And this is what they want to be like, right? Just as everybody fits around the table and just build stuff and you get it out there. And what we've tried to do as a company is stay true to this. So even though we are over 100 people now, we are organized into groups like this, groups of 5 to 7 people who work together on either a product itself or part of one of the bigger products. And as they grow, when they get bigger to 8 or 9 people, they split up into 2 teams again. And this way, we've been able to grow our company and really keep the feel and the agility of very small teams, and still get bigger in size as we've gotten huge in scale. And this has worked really, really well for us. And I encourage everyone to use this type of model instead of thinking that as you get bigger, if your company does end up succeeding and getting bigger, that you somehow now have to create these top-down, traditional kinds of organizations where you have the big giant engineering department and the big giant marketing department and so on. What we do is each one of these teams is optimized so that they can build and release code anytime without needing anybody else in the company. And This was really something we set out in the very beginning of Automattic to do, because we felt like one of the most fun things that we get to do is build software and get it out there and get it in the hands of customers. And at bigger companies, what happens with the best intentions is these gates and hurdles get put in place where you build code and then it has to be approved by the UI team or by legal, or it has to be reviewed by your security team, and it has to go through these processes, and there's the executive review and all this stuff. And it's 3 or 6 months later when your code finally makes it out into the real world and you're completely disconnected from it, and it's not fun. So our teams, everybody gets to release code whenever they want. They don't need anybody's permission. We are on a continuous deployment model. We release code 20 to 30 times a day to WordPress.com at scale to 2,000 servers. It takes us about 30 seconds to release production code. Anybody in the company can push the button and do it. And most importantly, because it's only 30 seconds, if you break something, you can revert in 30 seconds and go backwards, which is a key piece of the system because it really lowers the fear of making a mistake. So that's my pitch for small teams, and it's worked really, really well for us. The other thing on the people side that we focused on is we've thought about, as you get bigger, how do you really build out your culture and keep it very unique and attract the kinds of people who just love what you're doing. So we spend a lot of time on talking about what it's like to work for our particular company. Our whole recruiting pitch sort of centers around explaining what it's like to work with us. And a couple of the big differentiators for us are that WordPress is open source. So we have a WordPress foundation that's separate from the company that runs the open source piece, and then we have Automattic, which is the commercial side of it. And one of our pitches is you get to work on this great open source project that is really changing lives all over the world, but you get to have it be a job as well. Yet our company is set up separately, so we can't screw up the open source project, and vice versa. Another big thing is that we're distributed. So we hire people all over the world, wherever they are. We're not limited to one talent pool like Silicon Valley. We currently have people in over 25 countries. This is from our About page. We show everybody in the company who works for us and where they live. And as you'd imagine, in a model like this, people move around a lot. And it's very liberating to have a job where it really doesn't matter where you are. You can work from anywhere. The whole company is set up to accommodate this. And we make sure that even though we have an office in San Francisco, people don't go there every day. It's really more like a co-working space and a space where we can have meetings, but everybody works from home, so it doesn't matter where you are. It's been a very successful model for us. I get the question all the time, will it break? A lot of our advisors and investors have sort of prophesied that it's going to break. Oh, wait till you get to 20 people, wait till you get to 40 people. We're at 105 people and it's still working just fine. I've talked to other companies who are set up like this, who grew into the hundreds of people, and it works. And it's not for everyone, but I do think that it's a great model, and it set us apart, and it allows us to hire and recruit people in places where you can't get a cool tech job. And it really allows us to tap into an amazing talent pool. Another thing that we do is our hiring and onboarding process is a little bit different than what most people do. This is the Automattic creed that is part of everybody's offer letter. And it's one of the things we do to try and signal that we have very strong values as a company, and this is what we happen to believe in, and it's not right or wrong, but it is what we're about. We do with everybody we hire, after they sort of pass the initial screen and interview, we do trial projects. Everybody does about 3 to 5 week trial project. And the pitch there really is that it's for both of us, because for us it's really great to work with somebody first on a trial basis, and for you it's great because we're kind of different. We're distributed, working from home is not for everyone, and only about half the people make it through the trial. Sometimes they say, this is not what I expected. Sometimes it doesn't work for us. And then after somebody joins, the first thing everybody does, doesn't matter what your job is 3 weeks of customer support. So that's our onboarding process. And part of that is, it's just a great way to get to know some people in the company, to get to know our customers, to get to know the product. And also, I really like it because it just gives you something to do in those first few weeks. I think we probably all have that experience where you get into a first job and you do your HR orientation, and then you're like, okay, now what? And everybody's running around busy and doesn't have time, and you sort of slowly figure out how things go. So this is a great sort of on-ramp for people. And again, it's not a right way or wrong way to do it, but we do it this way, and we do it very consistently, and we tell people about it, and it really helps set us apart and give people a sense of what this is going to be like, which to me is one of the most important things in any company. Is just how do you build and scale your culture? First of all, how do you create it and make sure that you really believe in some important things beyond just wanting to have a startup and making some money? And then how do you scale that? How do you teach that and build it as you get bigger? I think a lot of startups rush past that step because we just want to get bigger and we want to get into a market, but in the long run, you can't build a successful company without it. The second thing I wanted to touch on before I'll take questions is product. So with people, product is always hugely important. My advice on product is to not take anybody's advice. This is what WordPress looked like when I first encountered it 6, 7 years ago. It was a small open source project. I completely fell in love with it. I installed the software, I loved it. It was very raw and rough at the time, but I just wanted to be part of that product and that community. And luckily, a bunch of other people did too over time. But really at the time, there would have been a million ways to talk about, to shoot holes into why this isn't going to work. You know, it's open source, it's hard to build businesses supposedly on top of that. How are you going to do that? It's only has a few thousand users. There's all these other blogging platforms at the time. Google had just acquired Blogger. You had Six Apart was a big company that was leading the market. And there were all kinds of reasons not to do this, but I just loved the product and I wanted to work on it. And you need that kind of passion and love for what you're doing, and you need to sort of ignore the people who either tell you that it can't be done, but also the people who have 1,000 suggestions about how you should do it differently, because you're the only person who really knows. And then the final piece I wanted to touch on was market. And I'll go back to this slide for that. So I've made the mistake in my career of working for companies that had a really cool product and a great team, like my first startup in virtual reality, but just weren't aimed at a big market. And I think this is, well, I explain it as being an engineer and being a product person, that this happens. I do fall in love with products and I just want to be part of it. And I sort of have to reel myself in and say, okay, is this really aimed at something huge? And this is not to say that the only company you should build is one that can be enormous. And again, in our case, it was the goal of running half of all the websites on the internet, which is a nice, big, juicy goal. There are lots of other cool pieces of software that can be built, but I have to say, if you want to raise VC money, and we are, you know, in this environment where you guys are looking to do that, you can't really do that unless you're truly aimed at something big. And I think you really have to honestly look at yourself and your company and your product and think about, is this truly, even if it works, can this be a huge company? And does this go after a market that's not only big, but I can actually get into? I made that mistake too with a digital music company. It's a big market, music, but you can't get into it. If your model depends on getting past the gatekeepers, which are the record labels, and you know, this hasn't stopped from 500 other digital music startups being funded and going out of business, but it's just a really tough market to break into if you're dependent on that distribution mechanism. So I think it's just very important that we're all keep that in mind, and certainly on the investing side, when I look at companies, I always try and think about, even if this plays out successfully, can this truly lead to a huge outcome? So that's my prepared presentation. I'd love to hear questions if you guys have any. I can go into details on, thank you.
A couple of questions. Anybody? Yep.
Thank you very much for your talk. Sounds very romantic.
And it's ups and downs.
It's beautiful. You just didn't tell us what's the relationship between open source project like yours and what's the business model of Automattic. So how do you earn the money to pay
Sure.
102 salaries every month, 12 months a year, and for the next 10 years?
Right. Great question. So when we started the company, the open source project already existed, and we did have the goal of wanting to build a big, successful commercial company. And we looked at other open source projects, and we didn't really see a model we liked. We saw the model where a company owns the open source project, and it gets big until a certain point, and then usually people leave the open source project because they go, why would I contribute to something that's company owned? So MySQL is a good example of that. It was a great open source project. It was company owned. It was acquired by Sun, then by Oracle, and it's just really hard to sustain that. But it was sold for $1 billion, so it had a great commercial outcome. But the open source project, I think, is challenged over time. Then you have on the other side, you have this sort of Apache or Mozilla model where it's pure open source, it's a foundation, the product can do really well, but you can't ever exit the opportunity because it's a nonprofit. So what we did instead is we kept the two separate. We created the foundation just for the software. So the open source WordPress software is in the foundation, it's GPL, it always will be. It will never be dual licensed or any nonsense like that. It's completely on its own. And then the company focuses on the hosted service. So the service, WordPress.com, if you want us to run WordPress for you, either at the consumer level or all the way up to the enterprise level, that's what we do. That's how we make money. At the consumer level, it's a freemium model, so you get a free site. Then you might buy a domain, you might buy a design upgrade to make your site look better. And then at the enterprise level, we sell hosting to the likes of the CNNs of the world who want us to just run their whole network of sites. So this way, we're able to make money off of really the service of just running the software for people, and the software itself can be free and open source, and anybody else can use it.
Couple more questions?
Yeah. Hi, Tony. Over here. Right. Yeah.
Hi.
So I'm Keith. So I have a startup that has a platform to let anybody create gamification campaigns. So I'm a huge fan of WordPress. You know, I'm from Singapore. It's huge over there. It's huge in Asia. And you know, I loved how you guys bring value to the world, how you guys make it so simple. Sometimes I pitch my startup as the WordPress for games. So I have a question for you. If you had the chance to be either be an investor or an entrepreneur, which one would you rather be? And you know, who do you think actually provides more value to this society? Thank you.
They're both very valuable. I actually don't. I mean, if I had to make the choice, it would probably be entrepreneur. But I think it's a false choice. When I started doing this, there were a lot of people who said, "Oh, you can't do that." It's like church and state. Like operating a startup and investing are two different things. You can't cross over, and it's just not true. It's just one of these things that, in my opinion, we thought was maybe the case, but I don't think it is, because my job is not all that different on both sides. I mean, for running a startup, certainly at our scale, is a lot about planning and strategy and trying to figure out, how can we make this bigger? And looking at investments, it's just the reverse of that. It's looking at something else, thinking, well, can this get to something big? And do I believe in the plan that this team has laid out? So, and there's a lot of overlap too. A lot of the companies I talk to actually want to talk to me about both WordPress and the WordPress ecosystem and investment. So that helps. But so I think you can do both. I love to create things. I love products. So I think I'll always be an entrepreneur.
Great. One more question? Anybody? Jack.
Tony, you said you grew up in Switzerland. I know the educational system there tracks people very early on into either a vocation or a profession or what have you, and you broke away from that and came over to Santa Barbara. Could you describe if you were tracked into something you didn't like and how you reinvented yourself over here?
It's a very interesting question. Yes, I have a lot of thoughts on that, actually. The Swiss school system is very efficient, and it produces a lot of very well-trained people. It has virtually zero unemployment because everybody is slotted so early and trained for a job. It's also a system where when you're 12 or 13 years old, you basically decide, or the decision's made for you if you're ever going to go to college or what your job is going to be. And as you can imagine, at 13, I think most kids don't have any idea what they're going to be, and they just go, oh, my parent was this, maybe I should do that, or this looks interesting. So overall, I wasn't a big fan of that system. I personally couldn't wait to get out of there. When I tell people that I went to Santa Barbara City College, it's, they were surprised. My college admissions or selection process consisted of applying to 2 colleges, actually. Santa Barbara City College, because I had met an American software engineer back in Zurich, and I just asked him, like, hey, what would you recommend? And he said, I went to City College, you should go there. So the other school I applied to was Pepperdine in Malibu, because a friend of my sister's uncle was a lecturer there. So these are literally the 2 only schools I even knew existed in the US. So, this is about the polar opposite of how people pick colleges today, but worked out really well for me. And really, when I got to City College, to me, it was a huge awakening. It was the first time I loved school, and it was a totally different experience. And even though I knew early on that I wanted to be in computers, so the slotting wasn't a huge issue for me, just the ability to learn in that kind of environment and a much broader type of richer, I think, educational environment than one that's just about academics and sort of getting you through was a great fit for me. It was also, I don't know if this still is the case today, but just growing up in a place like Switzerland and watching all those cool movies about American high school, I just couldn't wait to experience that. So. Thank you.